A very good morning to you. It's time for us to get into our day as we are waiting for the budget reading later on in the day. And I must say it's a very, very busy day for us here, and we're going to make sure that we bring you all the details in regards to the national budget. Of course, we'll be expecting, or rather seeing, the Honorable Matia Kasaija there come through and rather take on and deliver his speech, but also the Honorable Speaker of Parliament, that is Rebecca Kadaga, will be residing over this special sitting, and we do have an entire team that will be bringing you these details. Dennis Soga will be joining me, we'll be having Rachel Takali, we'll be having Patricia Lukoma, and also we shall be having Mark to bring us a whole lot more for you here in studios and also at Serena itself. And of course, we're looking at an estimate of about 41 trillion shillings that has been put into the Ugandan budget for the financial year 2019-2020. My name is Rowena Kajumba, and of course me and the entire team will be bringing you these details. But to start us off, we have our guest here with us in studio. We're going to be looking at a discussion focusing on internet and infrastructure, the internet growth, fostering economic development. But of course, just to point out, ICT has received the least funding, and we're looking at about 123 billion, coming to about 0.3% of the entire budget there. Well, we'll see how that plays out. But with me in studios, our host is Pierre Daginu. I hope I say that correctly. Pierre Daginu from Benin, and he is the Vice President, Global Stakeholder Engagement in Africa for the Internet Corporation for Assignment Names and Numbers. You can call it ICANN. You're very welcome.
Thank you.
And I'm glad for you to make time for us here, because you're very busy. I believe you're here for a summit?
Yes, the Africa Internet Summit.
Okay, interesting. But before we get into that, real quick, tell us about ICANN.
Well, thank you very much for having me here. And as you just said, ICANN stands for Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, which basically is about, the way internet works. So what we actually do is we make sure that this internet work in terms of the names and numbers that are actually the component of this internet. When I mean name, I'm meaning .ug, for instance. Meaning if I'm in Uganda and I have a website, it has to be .ug or whatever. But we also know about the .com, .org, all of them. They are called domain names, actually. And the way the internet operates is that, okay, these domain names, of course, are associated with something that we call IP addresses, Internet Protocol addresses. So it's the way you are able to match all of this, and then translating human language, into machine-readable language is the way internet operates. So what we do at ICANN is we facilitate these things. So we provide you with the tools that you need to actually communicate over the internet.
Okay,
yeah. Very
interesting. And how is that going so far? Looking at Africa as
so far, I would say, well, we are counting something like 3.8 to 4 billion, in terms of those who are now actually connecting to the internet. We still have 3, maybe billion more to go. It's actually more and more people are getting involved, and if you were to come to Africa, we are talking something like 35% of Africans now on the internet, and most of them getting on the internet no longer via their PC, which is personal computers, but using their phones, and which is really important now today. As we are talking, Africa is something like 900, million, of phone, that's been used in Africa, which is more and more African will be getting into the internet, using their phone. Now, we still have more to do, because I talked about 35%. We still need to grow more of this in terms of the infrastructure that we have. Also in terms of the business that we build around, this internet, the content development, local content development. And how can all of this thrive, the benefit of this of the younger generation that are coming, and that. So yes, Africa is doing well, but there's still more to do.
There's still more to do. Okay, now tell us more about the summit and why here anyway.
Okay, thank you. The AIS, which is the Africa Internet Summit, is an all-Africa kind of summit of all of those institutions, that are related to the internet. We call them AF Stars, which is Africa Stars. So there can be network operators. There is something we call AFRINIC. AFRINIC is the one that provides, for the what we call the internet protocols. They work out of Mauritius. We have AFNOG, which is about network, training network operators. We have research networks, the business, the industry, the academia. All of them meet, in one place every year in Africa. It happened to be Kampala this time. Okay. And by the way, I should thank the partnership that has been played here with a few of your institutions here that are really partnering with the African community to host this All Africa summit here. It's where they debate about what is happening, the way we are thriving in terms of internet, but also discuss issues. Because internet, like I was telling you about what we do at ICANN, it's not just about the technical sort of thing. Of course, we are a technical body, but at the same time, you need to build what we call policy around those, those unique identifiers. And that's what ICANN also does, how do you develop, this sort of policy? How can you be inclusive enough, in your deliberations? So, which means that people need to participate. So being here in Uganda, of course, we are happy, and of course, we will be requesting better participation or an increased participation from Uganda to the work of ICANN.
Okay. Now, you've hinted on things like policy. Is this a general problem across Africa?
No, we won't see those as problems per se. When you mean the internet identifiers, I talk about domain names, IP addresses actually. There are times where you really need what to do exactly about those things. If I will give you an example, there's something we call IPv4, which is Internet Protocol version 4. Today we no longer have any pool of that, apart from a very small number in Africa. All over the world, we have exhausted that pool. Meaning now we are moving into IPv6, which is Internet Protocol version 6, which is much more bigger, and provide more and more opportunities. Now, how do you do this sort of transition from your IPv4 to your IPv6? You have to put together some sort of policy here, sort of guidelines that all agree on, because internet is global. Internet is not just to be balkanized. Internet has to be unique, secure, and the way you have it, to be secure is that you all apply common policies. So yes, that's why it's important. Now, there are other issues pertaining to this. You'll be talking about data protection. You'll be talking about data handling. All of those. You have to come together and see which type of data you are talking about. And how do you assess this data? And it has to be done in a kind of multi-stakeholder way. It's not just about one side, fixing it for all of us.
So it has to be all multiple
government. It's about the business sector. It's about the civil society. All of them need to sit down sometime and develop, those policies.
Okay. So how's, if you're looking at internet usage within Africa, well, clearly you've been around just a while. I wouldn't want to really push you down to Uganda. But generally, in Africa, the internet usage, how do you find that?
Well, that's a good question. No, actually, Africans are using this internet. Basically, you see this in the social networks. You know all of them. Africans are quite prone on that one. Communicating is quite good, but we should not forget that we are also doing many other things in Africa in terms of applications that you see, be it in what we call the e-health, that you can really conduct different sort of medical acts using these technologies. It's there, it's up there, it's happening in Africa. You could talk about e-commerce. People selling on the web. Of course, today Africa is about 0.6%, if you compare this globally to the 12% in the US or 20%, in terms of e-commerce, meaning the traffic, you guys are generating. So we still have more to do in terms of e-commerce in Africa. But you do have e-agriculture. Today many countries are really just using their phone, to be able to actually get access, easier access to fertilizers, to the markets. Those things are happening in Africa and really transforming life of people.
Yes.
Now, obviously, we could do more of this, and we are also we are having something which is quite interesting, which is the younger generation. Many startups now, and you go all over Africa, you'll be seeing those startups in place in many different areas. So the good thing is that they are actually trying to solve local issues, yes, which is quite good. Now, with that, how do you sustain this? How do you support, these sort of, youngsters, startup? This can be some of the issues that we are facing in Africa. So we need to increase that support so that Africa really could benefit from this this internet. And,
okay. So is ICANN breaking ground in Uganda? Are you?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
No, ICANN is, like I tell you, we definitely are involved in, of course, technical part of it, make internet works, makes internet secure for everyone, make internet global. And the second thing we do is policy development. Okay. Now, when it comes to Uganda has been a member of the GAC, which is the Government Advisory Committee. Within ICANN, we have different stakeholders. Governments contribute to this through the GAC, which is the Government Advisory Committee. That's where governments, of course, also discuss policies and are able to make recommendations to the board of ICANN. Yes, ICANN, Uganda is one of the members of the GAC. So we can, yes, witness that Uganda has been a long-term participant to ICANN in terms of coming to our meetings. We do have 3 global meetings, every year. Okay. And of course, we do have participation from what you call the CCTLD, which is a country code top-level domain. So I think Uganda is also present. Now, maybe we need to go into what we might call localizing ICANN in Uganda. Okay. Meaning, how do we develop this sort of stakeholder model so that when it comes to internet issues, that those are dealt with in a sort of multi-stakeholder model, that we have to talk, because the internet is a common good of everyone. And in the country, it's not just about one part, doing it all. It's about, different partners, because one thing we didn't talk much about so far is the internet as an industry. Yeah. Because the internet is an industry, is even more than your domain names, but that you'll be selling. But it's also about your website that you develop. It's about so many other services that you can develop. For instance, as far as we are concerned in ICANN, one of the projects we are trying to do here is build capacity, for instance, on something that we call IDN, which is the internationalized domain names. What it does is that it helps you now translate some of the script into your own script, meaning that your own languages can be on the internet. Oh, yeah. So it's not just about using maybe the English or whatever French languages in Africa. You can still work so that your own languages, and then you are talking about inclusion. So you want to include more and more people. So if the 40 million of Ugandans now can access internet using their own languages, I mean, that would be very fantastic. You know. So, and this is possible today, and we are in town to do such a thing. We are going to have a meeting on Saturday, capacity building workshops, but we are also we'll have some conversation about how one could start kind of working groups on local sort of idea in Uganda, for instance.
Now, one of the things we hinted on earlier on was financial growth. Now, how does the internet, or rather internet usage, or the entire scope, if we're looking at internet fostering development, how does this happen?
You mean in Africa or globally?
In Africa. Let's start with Africa, then we'll go global.
What we know is that it is happening in terms of more and more sort of applications, being to the marketplace, even from Africa. They are generated from Africa, which is quite good. Now, what I might say is that for us to really see what internet is contributing to Africa, we also need to pay attention to what we are talking about here. First of all, the infrastructure. When you talk about internet, we're also talking about the access infrastructure that you need to put on the ground. Whereas Africa today has so many, I would say, close to 15 sort of cable, submarine cable that's surrounding the continent, we are yet to have more and more infrastructure that is going, in the interland. That can be an issue. So that's why we have not really succeeded in really including more and more Africans to that one. So the infrastructure is quite important. The local content that we develop, meaning in terms of the industry you are talking about, how about your music, for instance? How about your art?
Yeah.
All of this, the entertainment is something which is quite big. So if you consider what is happening today, the applications that are quite popular, most of them are coming from outside. Now, how do we make sure that we localize this entertainment, business in Africa? For me, these are opportunities that are there for Africa to tap into them. But people still need to get organized. From time to time also there are issues surrounding the financing of all of this.
Yes.
We are talking about infrastructure, the application that we need, but of course, the financing.
Okay. Now, financing is very key. I did mention earlier on in terms of our budget here and what has been allocated to. What does this mean? Because we talked about things like security and safety earlier on. Now, first of all, let us identify what finances might actually give in terms of an input, in terms of handling and solving issues of this nature. Now, if the finances are not quite enough at the end of the day, are we going to see that probably issues of this nature, for example, will actually be handled, or it is going to take us a little bit more time, because it seems to be a global problem. It seems to be a global problem, at the end of the day, and comes back down to us. And as Africa, it could be then much more difficult for us in terms of dealing with security. How does that, tend to affect at the end of the day?
Thank you. I hope I really understand your question, because it's about financing, also it's about
financing, bringing back to handling
things.
some of our issues like
in
security.
terms of financing, especially of this, the internet and how those can thrive, in Africa. This is not what I call, internet is not a business as usual for the financiers, meaning it's not just about agriculture, or whatever field where you can go to your bank and get money or whatever. What it takes here is more than those things. That's why we are also talking about, the fintech.
Yes.
And the fintech is about, financial technologies. It's the best way of covering, this area, which is internet and the rest of it. So what we are seeing today is, of course, your financing could come from the bank, from the government, from the state, and from also what we call alternative, way of funding this mechanism. So you are going to have, and in Africa we are seeing it today happening in many, many other places, where your startups, can be funded, can be financed, via different sort of models. And this model is working, at least in part of Africa. They are leveraging, you go to South Africa, you go to Kenya, you go to Rwanda. They are leveraging on this thing, and they are getting more and more financing on those things. It is happening, but we need to do more on that.
We need to do more.
Now you were talking about cyber security and some of the things. When it comes to the internet, one of the things we are witnessing today is that we need to make sure that that people are confident, on the internet. And how do you build this confidence? Of course, is that you need to secure, this. As far as ICANN is concerned, what we do most of the time is we basically make sure that the heart of it, which is the DNS, which is the domain name system, like I was telling earlier on, this domain name system needs to be secured. That's why what we do as ICANN is we manage to really build this sort of capacity workshop. We also sort of beef up people, talent, so that they are able to use something that we call DNS, that we call the DNS abuse, sort of programs, that so the DNSSEC, which is DNS security, is, for instance, for us an application that could really secure the internet. So what we do is from time to time, from countries, we managed to build capacity on these. That's the way ICANN is contributing to the cybersecurity. Of course, there are so many other components to cybersecurity where you might need to establish your own local strategy and policies about cybersecurity. But the domain, the DNS abuse is part of those threats that we are seeing. And you must have heard about it, some 3 to 4 months ago, there was some threats, on this DNS. And ICANN came out clearly and say, what are the recommendations, and that the importance of developing your DNSSEC, around your systems.
What do you expect to have achieved from this summit, having learned, because I'm assuming you want to learn from each other as well. What would you expect from this summit at the end of the day? Well,
as far as ICANN is concerned, we have a few sort of specific events that's going to happen during this AIS, this summit. One of them is our capacity building workshop vis-a-vis what you call the registry registrars, meaning those who are selling domain names, for instance, or those who are managing your domain name, your .ug or whatever. We want to discuss with them and impart, some skills on them in terms of how you manage, those unique identifiers, but also what are the issues, surrounding those different sort of identifiers, because it's always important that you are at space with whatever is happening. You should be up to date. So we are going to do this. It's quite a kind of technical sort of workshop, but at the end of it, we are expecting to have more and more people that are knowledgeable, as far as this is concerned. We are also having a workshop which we call the YouthCom, which is about youth. This is something which is we are targeting those who are under 30 years old. We want to impart to them, of course, the internet, the history of it, of course, how it works, but also what we call the internet governance. Because internet, the way I can see today, is about, part of it is about technology, but part of it is also about how we govern it, how we, what the policies that we put to place on that. So the governance of the internet is quite important. So we really want to introduce, this younger generation into it so that they understand those issues. This will be happening also here. And of course, the other one is the bigger event on the what we call ICANN Day, which is open to anybody to come and to of course listen to whatever we have to say about ICANN, but also what are the issues that people need to pay attention to. And of course, issues like cybersecurity, issues like business, all of those will be talked about. So yeah, our expectation. And finally, if our conversation moves on, one of the things we would like to be establishing here is to set up what I said, the IDN, the Internationalized Domain Name, a working group here in Kampala, so that people start working on the convenient script for you guys. Right now, we've done it in Ethiopia with Almaric, and you have the Arabic script as well. But we believe that we still need to work on kind of a local or national script. And I believe that if whatever language you choose here, definitely we can assist a working group so that maybe in the process they develop the appropriate script for your languages, and that your language will be on the internet. So this is a concrete thing that we want to achieve here.
Okay. Now, where do you see Africa real soon in regards to how fast we're catching on with the new age, if I could call it that? Where do you see Africa in just a few years from now?
I won't talk in terms of catching up anything.
Okay, we've caught up already.
Yeah, because we are Africa is thriving, is doing well in terms of internet. But there are still a few things that we really need to think about so that we got things right. Of course, I talk about the infrastructure, which we really need to. I talk about the role of the private sector, in Africa. It's also the issue of what we might call innovation in Africa. How are we really investing on innovation? How much of our universities are getting involved in internet-related technologies? You'll be talking about, Internet of Things, You'll be talking about artificial intelligence, all of these are things you don't need to, it's not about catching up. It's about seizing the opportunities to transform life. And this can happen in Africa. We don't really need to be running after whoever is there. It's for Africa to really seize the opportunity and see how it's going to really invest on that. And the investment is not just about financing, it's about how you are organizing your research, academies on those things, and how are you applying those to your development. I think it's what it is exactly. It's not about running after anyone and catching up with anyone. Exactly. I don't think so.
It's the opportunities there. We need to just grab it.
Yeah.
Okay, now real quick, because we're going through a couple of things. Any recommendations, with what we've been discussing about, and hopefully what, like you say, the opportunities here, we need to jump onto it and take it on. Any recommendations that you have for us?
Well, thank you. I think one of the things I like to say is that, at least in Africa, internet should not just be seen as by way of, social networks where you are on it, which is fine. It has to be seen also as a contributor to development in Africa. You heard something about the ODD, which are development, goals. Today we know that internet can really help us achieve those goals, and those goals are about it's about water, it's about sanitation, it's about food or whatever. All of this is possible actually. Internet makes it possible. Now it's all about how you self-organize to do those things. So there is an opportunity here. The second thing for me is job creation. Job creation for the younger generation. I see this as a big opportunity, and we really need to work, around those definitely, and see how we do support the startups, in Africa, and we nurture them so that they really become, real entrepreneurs, and that are able to contribute heavily to the growth of the country.
Okay. Anything else you want to add on that?
Well, just thank Uganda for having us here, having ICANN, and we are here really to assist. We are here to let people know about ICANN, and also we are here to have Uganda be a full part of ICANN globally.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I do appreciate you. With me here in studios is our guest, Pierre Danjinu. Danjinu.
Yes.
Yes, I got it. I think by the time I'm done here, I'll be Pierre Danjinu, and he is the Vice President, Global Stakeholder Engagement in Africa for the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, and he's been very clear on this particular issue and how we should start looking at the Internet. We should not just look at it as, a way of social media, communicating here and there. It's a bigger picture than that. We have so many youth that can take on this particular opportunity. He did talk about app development and a number of other things there that he did mention. But I do appreciate you so much for your time. And the summit is still ongoing?
Yes, till next week actually.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Same within the same week of the budget week, and I must say, very important time, good timing, if I could mention that. And I earlier mentioned in regards to what has been allocated there, of course, very sadly, but hopefully, like you say, there's so many ways of funding these particular sectors at some point. But do not go away. You're still watching UBC Inspiring Uganda. We're in for the budget analysis. We have a lot more in store for you. We have so many people that are coming through to discuss this particular budget, and also in regards to our economic development and the bigger picture at the end of the day. It's not just about the budget reading. You're still watching UBC Inspiring Uganda. My name is Rowena Kajumba, and we're taking through a number of things, some of the sectors and some of the achievements that the country has been able to have. Don't go away. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Yes. Amelia Ann Chambade is a Ugandan politician. She is the current Cabinet Minister of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives in the Ugandan Cabinet. She was appointed to the position on the 6th of June 2016. She has previously served as Cabinet Minister of Trade and Industry between the 27th May 2011 and 6th June 2016. She replaced Kahinda Otafire, who was appointed Minister for Justice. Amelia Chambade is also elected Member of Parliament. She attended Gayaza Primary School in Wakiso District for her elementary education, Gulu Sacred Heart High School in Gulu District for her secondary education, and Aga Khan School of Secretarial Studies in Nairobi, Kenya for her post-secondary education. Amelia Chambade holds the degree of Bachelor of Business Administration from Makerere University, Uganda's oldest institution of tertiary education, founded in 1922. She also holds the degree of Masters of Business Administration from the American Intercontinental University in London, United Kingdom. She started working in the Ugandan Civil Service in 1979 at the age of 24. She rose to the rank of Principal Private Secretary of the President of Uganda. In 2010, she voluntarily resigned as the President's PPS to contest the parliamentary seat of Maokota County North in PG District during the Uganda national elections of 2011. She won her parliamentary contest and is now the incumbent Member of Parliament for the constituency. On 27th of March 2011, she was appointed Minister for Trade and Industry, and on 6th June 2016, she was named Cabinet Minister of Trade, Industry and Cooperatives in the cabinet list released that day. Well, I was still speaking to my guest here, but well, the fact that he's here, well and good. We're going to be looking at the issue of taxation here. And earlier on, as we started off the day, we did have our colleagues there talk about the taxes levied. And of course, that's some of the things we're going to be discussing here with my guest this morning. And his name is Obed Tindiewa, who is a tax consultant with CPA. And of course, very important to have this sort of discussion. Of course, it does come back down to what we're expecting and how we shall be able to fund our budget at the end of the day. But you're very welcome.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for making time. Right, it's raining out there.
Yeah.
Thank you for making time.
Okay,
now,
please.
real quick, tell us about your role at CPA. Rather, let's tell us about CPA, then we'll get into your role as Obed in CPA.
Okay. The CPA is, we usually say ISPA,
Yes.
the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Uganda. Now, this is a body that was set up by an act of parliament to regulate accountants in Uganda. So, all activities to do with accountants, it is the one that regulates.
Okay.
And I sit on the Tax and Economy subcommittee of the Institute, ISPA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So the right
In
person.
addition to that, of course, I'm a tax practitioner.
Interesting. So you're the right person to have in this discussion in regards to tax and also compliance.
Yes,
but real
please.
quick, let us look at our situation at hand as a country. Our tax body, for a while there, we've been having sometimes hits and misses. But we are looking, we are earlier talking about it, we are looking at probably 14 or 16% if we're looking in this particular case at the tax GDP ratio in regards to achieving our goal of the budget being funded there, over 20 trillion that we're looking at for the body to achieve and also get to be funded in the budget. How possible is this for you?
Now, the issue of tax to GDP ratio, of course, measures the performance of the URA or the government in terms of tax corrections. On average, the sub-Saharan Africa, we have an around 18–20%.
Okay.
And Uganda, we have been stagnating around 13–14%. And actually, some sources are saying this year we should be achieving about 14%. It's in that range. It shows that we are improving in terms of performance, in terms of revenue correction, but we still have a lot to do.
Okay.
When the economy grows, it is anticipated that tax correction should grow in line with the growth in the economy. When we have been experiencing an average of 5%, 6% growth in the economy, we would expect that actually the tax revenue to GDP ratio should also be increasing. At times, why we are not seeing like the growth in tandem is that there are exemptions that the government grants on certain sectors.
Yes.
Because when you look at like industrialization, you find that some industry players are exempt. It means that reduces the tax corrections. And therefore, as much as the economy grows, you'll find that it may not grow in line with, in tandem with the growth in the GDP. However, we think that that is achievable because as we are told, URA currently has even a surplus. And that is something to celebrate.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll even see more surplus.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah.
Okay, now real quick, let us look at the fact that we are seeking, or rather looking at funding, well, rather a bigger part of our budget here. If we're looking at most of the things, our domestic revenue and all things of that nature, to fund the budget 2019-2020, is this something you feel maybe would work for us at the end of the day as a country?
Yeah, of course, as a country, we need to make sure that we finance a bigger portion of our budget. I mean, every country would want to achieve that.
Yes.
It is like if you consider your home, you would not want to be relying on your neighbors to make sure that you survive as a family. So as a country, we also need really to ensure that much of our budget is funded from domestic resources. The only challenge is that over time, I think from 2045, around there, the percentage that we are funding from domestic revenue collections is slightly declining.
Yes.
At one time we were funding 75%, but now we are almost funding 50% or slightly below. Here I'm trying to say that when you look at the resource envelope, the total expenditure we're expecting of about 40 to 41 trillion, we are expected to collect between 19 and 20 trillion from domestic tax revenue sources. That means then the other bit will be borrowings, either internal or externally, and donations and grants from other development partners. Yes, please.
Yes. Let's talk, if you have something else, you can add on that before I go to the next question.
What I was trying to say that in terms of borrowing domestically, we always have a big challenge. That when the government starts competing for private credit, that becomes a challenge to the economy because it crowds out. In short, we're saying that government can afford a high interest rate. Now, if individuals are competing for the same amount of money, then they are kind of sidelined because government has more resources. So it is not a better way of doing that.
It is not a better way of doing it. Interesting. Let's look at the current situation. Just a few, I think, weeks back or days, when we're looking at some of the goods that were going to be, of course now we're looking at taxing most of the goods that are coming through in terms of imports. Do you agree with that? Do you feel happy about that change that probably is looked into?
Yeah, that change is good in one or another, to the extent that those goods can be produced locally.
Yes.
In terms of promoting our industries locally, and in line with the government policy of Buy Uganda, Build Uganda, Bubu, we expect that we should see kind of some protectionism, if I can call it, in terms of our industries locally. So to say that at least taxes on some goods which we've been importing increases to encourage local producers is good. But as I said, usually what we need to evaluate is, do we have the capacity to produce those goods required and in adequate amounts and quality? I think that is the trade-off that usually comes in.
Because at the end of the day, we could be very impressed by this, but we're not able to deliver.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Okay, quite interesting. Now, now that we're speaking taxes, some of the things that came out, or rather that were hinted on within the debate, real quick, for example, the rental tax, probably as a way of, finding a way of getting more revenue here. Is this something that you feel is going to be a controversy for us at the end of the day, or it should be a direction we're headed to?
In terms of rental tax, I want to believe it is some area which over time maybe URA, maybe government has not really, can I say, exploited well. Let me use that. We've seen a significant growth in the property sector.
Yes.
I mean, if you look around Kampala, you see rentals, apartments.
Yep.
But the issue is, what contribution are we getting from rental tax? You see, the principle of taxation is you tax the sector that is growing.
Yes.
Because that means there is money there. The other day, that's why OTT was brought. Everybody is on social media, tax it.
Yes.
Of course, despite its controversies. So we're saying that if property sector is growing, let's also realize more income from rental tax. I think 2 years back, the government came up with even a proposal where they're saying that if you do not file your rental tax return, the minister came up, there was a regulation where a minister should estimate the rental tax you are likely to pay, so that people are brought into the bracket. How effective it has been, between me and you, we need to know. But it is somewhere where we can really exploit, because it is a growing sector and it is a sure deal. Once you have a rental property for the next maybe 20 years, or how many, you still earn that.
It could help us hit our target, yeah?
Yeah, sure.
Very interesting. Now, another issue that was brought up, and we were talking about it earlier on, is quite controversial here. But when we were looking at taxes, you talk about OTT and what, but agriculture was one of those. And the government was thinking about, well, we can reduce from the 6% to 1%. You know, there was that discussion because agriculture, of course, many were saying, how do you put that much weight on the agricultural sector, on agricultural produce? And then they said altogether, let us scrape off this withholding tax on the agricultural sector. But like we said, it has controversies. We're going to get into the controversy of it. But would it do us good if we just totally gave up on this tax?
Now, agriculture sector is one important sector in Uganda.
Yes.
It employs about close to 70 or about there % of our population.
Yes.
But when you look at its contribution to GDP, it is lower, about 20–25%. And economists believe that if you are going to develop to be a middle-income country, you need actually the contribution of agriculture sector should reduce. But one thing we need to be clear about is that Uganda, we have a comparative advantage in terms of agriculture because we have rich soils, we have good rainfall, you know, all those other factors. So we can do better in agriculture. And agriculture can support agro-processing industry.
Yeah, which is one of the key things.
Yeah, and the industrialization is one of the key sectors, key areas where this budget is focusing. Therefore, if we are going to promote industrialization, we need also to look at how is the linkage between industrialization and agriculture. However, we also need to appreciate that as we widen the tax base, we need to bring more sectors and more people into the tax net. Yes. Now, this is where we need to strike a balance. That in terms of agriculture, we have people who are in subsistence, you don't have to disturb them. After all, they have not much. But there are also those progressive or commercial farmers. It's a business, like any other business. So those ones should be brought into. And why the 6%, 1% came in was that, especially for those who supply formal businesses, the withholding tax should apply. Like what I'm trying to say, if you are supplying a sugar plantation with, a sugar factory with sugar cane, when they are paying you, they should deduct 1% of the gross payment. Of course, it brought a lot of issues. It's controversial, but what we're saying is, my view is that we need really to start bringing some of those people in the commercial agriculture because it's a business.
So, scraping off this tax would not do us any justice.
Yeah, it would not do us any justice. We still need it. It is 1%.
Okay.
It is 1%.
It's just 1%.
It is 1%.
Interesting. Well, of course, I must point out that looking at the fact that this particular budget, well, the minister was addressing and said this particular budget is meant to address some of the loopholes here in tax administration and also compliance. And what we're looking at here is improving on the use of third-party information and also the tax base. Yes. Now, this is very, very important, you know, knowing that you're very passionate about the whole issue. Do you agree that this budget is actually addressing this issue?
In one or another, the budget is addressing that issue, and it has been an ongoing process. Where the taxpayer revenue improvement project or something, bringing more people into the tax net, but especially basing on a team, tax identification number. That currently, if you want, for example, to get a trading license, if you want to engage in any business with government, you need to have a tax identification number 18. And of course, once we get it, you are now in the tax net. And the measures which have been brought about of emphasizing that no government or agency should give a license or deal with somebody who doesn't have a TIN is towards that line. But I think encouraging compliance goes beyond that. With e-tax, I think there has been a kind of some reluctance where officers sit in office and remain on computers looking at e-tax and they think they are reaching the lower person. You still need to combine that with the field visits. Go to the field and see who your clients are. You see, one thing about technology is that it is good. It simplifies things, but at times it has also its weaknesses. There are people where you find that, for example, in Uganda, you cannot access internet. How are those being brought into the e-tax? Because everything that we do now is on e-tax. How is government tackling that?